Hey guys, and welcome back to a new mobile dev news episode, this time for November, which is the format in which I always summarize those news, especially Kotlin related news from the Kotlin ecosystem for you that are simply the most relevant, because let's be honest, so many changes come so frequently in the mobile development world, in the Android world, in the Kotlin multi-platform world, that it is just completely understandable that you say, I can't catch up with all that. So I'm doing this for you and just condense what you need to know in order to stay up to date. And starting with not really a piece of news, but something that is very relevant right now, especially if you have an app deployed to Google Play. Because from November 1st, which is likely already there when this video comes online, Google Play has the requirement that you have to comply with these 16 kilobyte page sizes for your app. What the heck is that? Well, in the end, that is just something that relates to native code. So if your app uses the Android NDK, either yourself or maybe a library that you're using could also use the NDK. And well, here they talk a lot about that, blah, blah, blah. Android has originally used 4 kilobyte memory page sizes, so it's about how large your memory blocks are internally. But now 16 kilobyte page size is the default, which all apps have to support that are deployed to Google Play. Benefits, performance gains, so they say lower app launch times, reduced power draw, faster camera launch, improved system boot time. So in the end, just a little bit better performance for all apps and the system itself. That is why they make it a requirement that your app has to support that. And that means if you have an app deployed to Google Play that uses native code, either itself or via libraries, as I mentioned, then you won't be able to update it now unless you switch to these 16 kilobyte page sizes. How does that work? How do you even detect if your app supports that already or needs to support that? Well, Android Studio has an APK analyzer, which is the best place to check this. Here I have an Android page size demo in which I've actually added some kind of video streaming SDK here from Stream. Since such SDKs that have a very close system integration with hardware, be it video rendering, be it some kind of audio or image processing, that's something that is very likely going to use the NDK, since it's simply something that has to run very performantly and therefore is implemented with native code. I've just added this here for demo. Since then, Android Studio has an APK analyzer, which you can use to analyze the contents of an APK file, which in the end is nothing else than a zip file with a different name. And this will look like this here. So you would simply go to Build, Generate Bundles or APKs, click Generate APK. This can be your debug build of the APK. You click this, and then you will get this little pop-up here where you can click on Analyze, and then this window here will open up. Takes a little moment until more information appears here under the alignment tab, but that is the one that is relevant for you here, because it will include a line for every single native library, so these SO files, together with whether that library or this SO file supports the 16 kilobyte page size. And you can see some of these do support that already, but some of these still use the 4 kilobyte page size. And as long as your app has any libraries that use 4 kilobyte page size and don't support 16 kilobyte, then Google Play is not going to accept updates anymore to your app. So if this appears for you, how do you fix this? Well, in the best case, you are just using libraries that use native code like I am here. So this is not a project that uses the NDK in any way, except for this library here, the Stream Video SDK, uses the NDK under the hood. And in that case, well, the library's authors will have to fix that, but you will very likely have to simply update the library's version. So if we do this here and we bump this to the latest version, synchronize this, and then generate another APK, then we should see that this will properly support the new page size. So generate a new APK. There we go. We click Analyze. And as I mentioned, takes a little moment until this is really analyzed and something will appear here under the alignment category. But especially here for this lib, we want to expand this here, lib, because this contains our native code. And now you can see, we see 16 kilobytes for all these different SO files. So now our app is fully compliant with that requirement. In case you run the native code, so you have the NDK implementation inside of your app and you wrote some C or C++ code, then it's also you who has to fix that. That's something I don't want to go into detail here because this is very, very dependent on what you're doing in your native code when it comes to how you can fix that. But I assume if you know how to write native code, you will also have an idea what this page size is all about. And coming to the other piece of news that I think is really cool, and that is that a new version of Material 3 Adaptive 1.2.0 is stable, which is a pretty nice version that is definitely worth talking about, so that is in the end the library that lets you implement those adaptive layouts here with different panes, especially for the list and detail pane. That is a very cool composable that it brings here, list detail pane scaffold. where handles the entire adaptiveness of your app if you have a list in a detail screen. But it also has that, for example, for supporting panes. What does this update bring? Well, on the one hand, we have 2 new window size classes. So in case you're not aware, window size classes are in the end specific classes of window sizes, that's what the name says after all, that you can use to support adaptive layouts. So you can see it categorizes different types of windows into compact, medium, expanded, large, that is new, and extra large is also new. So especially if you're targeting very large devices, possibly real monitors or even TV, then with these 2 extra types of window size classes, you now have more fine-grained control over how you want to display and how you want to render certain layouts in different screen dimensions. But what's also cool is that these adaptive layouts have changed a little bit, or have do support new ways of supporting adaptiveness after all. And they call it reflow and levitate. With reflow, what you can achieve is that you in the end separate your UI here into these 2 categories. For example, could also be more. It becomes a little bit clearer here in the Material 3 docs. So if we scroll down here a little bit, you can see that with these new adaptive layouts, you can really have more fine-grained control over when you show something. Then you can resize this. That is what they support out of the box. Then you can also define how multiple panes are displayed. Here, these floating panes, that is what they call levitate. So you can define that a certain part of your UI of this adaptive layout is simply rendered on top of other components in certain scenarios that you can then also define. So here this would, for example, be a docked state, like a bottom sheet or so. This would be a more dialogue-like way of displaying something. Or you can say that certain panes are simply displayed next to each other, and you are really in full control here when it comes to defining the scenarios about when to show which type of layout and where to render each different type of pane. Here you can also see with levitate, we can in the end have these floating panes, or we can also leave them in this docked way that they simply always stay at the same position. Here an example shows that we can also show a certain piece of content as a dialog on larger screens and as something like a bottom sheet on that is simply docked here on smaller screens. So really cool examples here on this website that makes it really clear what you can do with these layouts. Here this is the reflow they've talked about, that is pretty new. So you can now on the one hand arrange this not only horizontally but also vertically in a vertical fashion, which I think wasn't possible before with these adaptive layouts. And then you can also resize this as you want. So pretty cool changes. Not too much other relevant stuff in this month, but this was still enough that I consider this episode worth making. In case you're maybe an Android or Kotlin multi-platform developer and you want to really take the next step in your career, but you feel a little bit lost with what you need to learn and how you need to learn that, then check our advanced premium courses down below, in which we really take you by the hand to teach you everything you need in the real job world out there right now. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you back in the next video. Have an amazing rest of your week. Bye bye.